I will try to add to these positive emotions one big, beautiful thing. I speak about two emotions, positive emotions. One is pain, and the other one is suffering. And there's a certain prejudice that we are obsessed with positive thinking. I'm working against that. The interesting thing is, so paradoxical as it might sound, to know the difference between pain and suffering is the key for long-lasting, self-maintaining, natural happiness. The one you were born with, we all were born with. That's why we call it the non-trivial side of happiness. My education as a trainer and coach was schizophrenic right from the beginning. At one hand, one of my very first teachers was Viktor Frankl. He is a psychoanalyst, was a Holocaust survivor, made his own school out of it. It's called logotherapy, and in the Frankl universe, everything is around the subject of purpose. Like his best-selling book says, Man in Search for Meaning. That's a very beautiful, very deep, humanistic, philosophical concept. When you work with it, the only problem is that you get it into practice, that you weave it into your daily life habits. That's always a struggle. On the other hand, I'm a master trainer in NLP, and this is a very practical model, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. In this model, human beings are pain-avoiding, pleasure-seeking beings. You can even say pain-pleasure machines. You get results quickly, not ever long-lasting, but the biggest problem working with this model is that everybody involved feels that this model, this pain-pleasure model, is leaving out one of the most important parts of our human beingness. It can't explain the most important things in our life. If we were pain-avoiding, for example, no kid would do something forbidden, knowing that it will be punished for that afterwards, in the wrong family, even physically. The kid does it anyway. No firefighter would run into a burning building, leave alone this one soldier who 6 months ago in Afghanistan threw himself upon a grenade to save the life of 5 of his comrades who had family at home and he didn't. And there's no postponement for later, bigger pleasure. There is no later. And this pain-pleasure model doesn't describe what's going on there. There is some other source of motivation deep inside of us. So for a time, I was working with those two models, and I was happy if only one would be applicable in one of the contexts that I was working with. And most of the time, one of those two models was applicable. And a little voice in my head was telling me that maybe there should be a common denominator, because those two models exist in the same universe. It's all about the human soul and behavior. And isn't there a unified field theory? And to be honest, I avoided this question because my first efforts to answer this question showed that this is a very complicated subject. At least it seemed to me like that at the beginning. And then I had this one incident. There's this Zen saying that is, for those who know how to listen, everything is the guru. And for me, I met my guru very unexpectedly when I was going home from a seminar in wintertime in Vienna, and I made the bad decision to take the southeast tangent. As you may know, this is an inner city highway in Vienna, but bad weather and bad drivers make it a very long parking lot, and this was one of the occasions. And there was no movement at all. I stopped my car, made myself comfortable for the next hours, looked to my left, to my right, and here she was sitting. Lady in the next car, she was still holding the steering wheel tightly so that her knuckles were shining brightly through the dark, and she was yelling at somebody. She really had a go at someone, but there was nobody in the car and no headset, and she was really going for it. And I was sitting there, amazed, looking at her, and she wouldn't stop. And next to me, I had this bag with little chocolates that we give away at our seminars. And then I had an impulse. I took one, stepped out of my car, walked over to hers, knocked at her window and said, "Please open it." And she looked at me, opened it for a slot like that. The trust was just building up. And she said, "Yes, please." And I said, "You didn't look so happy from over there. And I thought maybe you would enjoy a piece of chocolate, would you?" And she was baffled, looking for the right words, and she came up with, "No, thank you, I'm not allowed to take candy from strangers." Really, I swear, swear to God. And now I was the baffled one because she was clearly grown up, somewhere between 30 and 60. And I thought to myself, great, in November snow with your chocolate and attention, what you do. And I wouldn't go back, so I went for another try. And I said, last week I've been at Karlsplatz in a traffic jam. So that's another famous place where we have jams. When you're a tourist, go there, join us. And because the car of a lady died and she couldn't start it and all the others were honking and she was trying and the stress level was building up, but she suddenly left her car, went to the driver behind her and said, "You as a man, you know better how to handle this technical stuff there, would you please try to start my car? I stay here and I honk for you. Is this okay?" And I had my first giggle with my lady in the car. She said, and that's a good sign. As a coach, you're looking for that, because this means that an old habit breaks up. And she says, "Thank you, but why are you telling me this story?" Still not enough trust. And I said, if it's really important for the big plan of the universe that someone is right now sitting in your driver's seat yelling at somebody for whatever reason, I even don't want to know, I'll do that for 5 minutes. You can move in the meantime, get some fresh air, relax a bit, but after 5 minutes you would have to come back and step in for me again, because I wouldn't do that longer than 5 minutes. With these words, she was looking out into the dark, and you could almost hear these little wheels go click, click, click. And then without looking at me, she opened the window and said, "Give me all your chocolate." And I did, happily. I gave her this one piece and got all the rest of the chocolate. We were having a chocolate party there. And she came out of the car and she said, "I'm so grateful that you took me out of this mess. But may I ask you, why did you do that?" And I confessed, I'm a trainer and coach, one of the worst kind. I have it not only as profession, but also as passion, 24/7. And she said, "Really? That means you're on duty?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Okay, Mr. Coach, then please tell me, why was I doing that in the first place?" And I couldn't. I was trying to apply the purpose model, and she interrupted me and said, no, yelling at this guy from my office who 1 hour ago said this sentence just before I left the office, yelling at him without him present hearing it, he who deserves it, doesn't serve any of my life's purposes. I said, "Yeah, I thought so." And then I have this pain-pleasure model, but to be honest, I will use our meeting here as a proof that we are not pain avoiding. Here I am. Because if we were pain avoiding beings, nobody would do that. Nobody would go back to old drama and relive it, because there is no actual pain. We would all be occupied with our sexual fantasies or enlightened thoughts, whatever your taste is, but we wouldn't do that. And she said, "That's interesting, because there was only a little pain when my colleague, just before I left the office, said the sentence, but my suffering is still huge." And here it was suddenly, and this was the first moment I was thinking about the difference between pain and suffering. And before you start to think about it, you simply suppose that pain is one little thing, and suffering is a big quantity of pain, isn't it? It's our first estimate. And it's none of this, none of this. When I became father for the first time, when I heard about it, my wife was standing in front of me and she said a very simple sentence. She said, "We're going to have a baby in 6 months. This is 7.5 years ago. The blonde man over there, he's the one. He's not looking at us. You can watch him." and my wife and my daughter. It's his fault. And she said, "We're going to have a baby in 6 months." And I immediately decided to become a medical doctor in order to have control over the birth process then, the male approach, you know. And then when I came back to my senses, I realized that 6 months wouldn't be enough, which is amazing in and out of itself, isn't it? In 9 months, you can create a wonderful human being, but it takes 6 years for a medical doctor. Isn't that odd? In and out of itself. But I was in need for a better plan, and I made a wonderful plan. And this was one of the most fruitful projects I've ever had. I started to talk to mothers who had just given birth to human beings. And I learned a lot. And one of the most amazing things for me was that all of these ladies said that they were prepared for the worst pain imaginable. And then what happened was a multitude of that. And amazingly, even more amazingly, none of these women would describe this pain as suffering. Not one, not a bit of it. So you have this huge amount of pain and no suffering at all. Why? Yeah, simply because at this occasion it's apparent that this pain adds something to the continuity of life. And this is exactly Frankl's definition of purpose in life. And therefore, that's no suffering. We call this surrender. That's purposeful pain. Now, something happened. Now, suddenly, those two universes merged. We have purposeless pain, that's suffering, and there is little pain enough already. One wrong look that hurts and doesn't serve any meaning, leaves both parties as losers. Both want to make something better out of the situation than that was what happened. That's already suffering, one wrong word. And on the other hand, you have purposeful pain. We call this surrender. In this model that emerged, that is on the basis of our coaching education in our institute. Now the question arose, okay, can you apply the Franklin model also to the pleasure side of the pain-pleasure model? And what comes out of this? And interestingly enough, the first question that hit me was, is there something like purposeless pleasure? Isn't all pleasure good? And of course there is. Viktor Frankl had a client that he showed us. A woman, depressive and suicidal because she, 3 years ago, lost one of her 3 kids. Her daughter died after a car accident in her arms while she was waiting for the ambulance. And out of this traumatic experience, she became depressive and suicidal. And she couldn't stand the suffering, so she got medical drugs. They helped pleasure, reducing of pain. She became addicted, realized it, stopped the drugs, came back to real world. All the suffering was still here, and she was worse off than before because she lost the contact to the other kids during the addiction and to her husband. So she had more suffering afterwards. Every drug addiction has this. It gives you some pleasure now, and afterwards you're worse off than before. We call that distraction, because it distracts you from suffering for a time, and you need that. If you have no other way out of suffering, you need this window of distraction simply to survive. But the problem is that it starts a downwards spiral, and people know that, and call this crisis. I met a lot of my clients in this state. They're just penny between suffering and distraction. And there is another quadrant left now. Is there purposeful pleasure? Yeah, there's a beautiful old word, very simple. It's called joy. And that is when you are having pleasure and you're not making it alone by yourself, but you participate together with others. That's the real thing that we want. We want to have this kind of pleasure that is a kind of giving and receiving. We heard cooperation today. That's an idea. I think that this day is a celebration of this joy, isn't it? People are coming, sharing their ideas from here and also in the breaks. And afterwards, you had a great day, and you have more ideas, you have better social bonding than before. That's what we in our model call joy. And now, when you arrive at these 4 quadrants, you see that there are new challenges. Most of the clients I meet, they are simply pending between suffering and distraction. And their question is, can I go to the other level so that I'm living with surrender and with joy? Is this possible? And every time when this happens, it's like magic. It's like an angel walks through the room. Viktor Frankl did it with this client, with the mother who lost her daughter in her arms. He was listening carefully to her for 1 hour, very empathically, and just when he was saying goodbye, like he often did, he was already shaking her hand. It's like the Columbo effect. The client thinks already the session's over, and then he always came with one question, and this blew everything away. And he did so. He said goodbye, and said, I'm a father by myself, and I was just thinking of all your pain and all the kids today that die. And I think not all kids that die today have the gift of dying in the arms of their mother. Your kid had this special gift, and for me the question arises, are you willing to pay the price for that, or is this price too high for you? And he left the client with this sentence. She was totally confused. And she came back 1 week later, and we students didn't even realize that this is the same person like 1 week ago, because she was completely changed in her whole appearance. And she opened the session with, I'm willing to pay this price for the rest of my life. I'm happily willing to pay this price. And I realized when I got home that I have 2 more kids and a husband who is still here, and I experienced the joy of having family at the same time. And I thank you very much. I'm content with that. For me, the session's over. And Frankl said, I thank you for this lesson. And after 10 minutes, the second session was over. Isn't that magic? I think this is the one thing that we human beings are capable of, that we can do. This is the kind of magic that helps us to go to any dark ages, and all the examples also from Egypt that we heard, for me always, in this transition from suffering to surrender and joy. But the question is, when you know it is possible to change from this level to the other one, when you go to surrender and joy, the question there is, why does this feel so magically? In my opinion, it's because we all started at this level up there. I'm so happy. This was the best possible speech before mine, to have the young lady speaking there. We all started pending between surrender and joy. Every kid does this. There's a study of Lee Berg, Loma Linda University. How many times does the average 3-year-old laugh per day? 400 times. 400 times. And the typically American grown-up, 12. Where's the rest? We are just taken away by education, socialization, and so on. Kids have a lot of joy, and they have surrender. How many times does the typical kid fall down before it knows how to walk, hurt its knee, head, whatever, just to move safely? And it does it anyway, or becomes punished by us because it doesn't fit in our model of the world. And does it anyway and goes for it because it's adding to the continuity of life, its own and life in general, isn't it? The good message for you here would be that we all started there. No suffering at all. We had reasons. If not the grown-ups really make the kid suffering, there's no suffering at all for the kids. They had any reasons. They would have any reasons to suffer. They could stand there as a 3-year-old. You could say, oh my God, I have no job, no education, no driver's license, not even a bank account. That's a good thing. And I'm so small, look at my little feet. Everybody can lift me up, oh my God, and kiss me. And I'm still wearing diapers, you know. But the kid doesn't. It has a very different agenda. The good news for us is that's hardwired into our brain. We spend our first years using all these circuits that are still there. And we know it. And I hope that's the reason why I chose this subject for the honor of having this talk. From my experience with clients and participants in our seminars, I know that a lot of people, when they just realize that you don't have to avoid pain, you don't have to avoid suffering, you don't have to look for happiness. You just have to look for the right amount between joy and surrender. And you are doing that today. You're having joy, and there is some surrender, because there would be, I guess, somewhere else, some more possible pleasure for you right now with other people. But you give up a bit of the pleasure to hear me and other speakers in the hope that it adds something to your life's purpose. Let this day not be the exception. Make it the rule again. Let other days where you have suffering and distractions, let this be the exception. Viktor Frankl said, we can fill our moments of life with purpose. In our words, with joy and surrender. We can look for the right challenges and the right joy. When we do that, then we live a fulfilled life, because surrender and joy leaves traces in our heart. I would like to close with words from Rudyard Kipling, who made it even more precise. He said, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. In my version, you'll be a human, my friend. Thank you very much.